The last port of call, the Wanderer's dream shuddered as it docked at Kepler Station, its hull scarred by 7 years of deep space exploration. Captain Marcus Holt ran his weathered hand along the bridge console, feeling every vibration that spoke of worn-out engines and failing life support systems. Behind him, his crew of 6, 3 humans and 3 aliens, watched the bustling Frontier trading post through the viewport. "Well, that's it then," said Zara Okafor, the ship's engineer, her dark skin gleaming with sweat from her final repairs. "She's held together with prayers and plasma tape, but she got us home." The Zenthra pilot, Kethvar, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "Home is a curious word, human. We have no home now that our contract is complete." Their mission had been simple in concept, brutal in execution: chart the outer spiral's unexplored systems, catalog resources, and identify habitable worlds for the Galactic Survey Corps. 7 years of dodging pirates, surviving stellar storms, and mapping empty space had netted them a substantial payout, enough to retire comfortably on any civilized world. "The ship's worth maybe 30,000 credits a scrap," announced Tomas Rivera, their navigator, consulting his datapad. "The buyer wants her for parts." Jexra, their Corvana medic, flexed her forearms nervously. "So we divide the money and go our separate ways. After all we've been through." Marcus looked around at faces that had become family. Through the viewport, he could see the planet below, Verdant Prime, they called it. Rolling green hills, clean rivers, and vast stretches of unclaimed land. The locals had been friendly enough during their brief supply runs, mostly farmers and small-time miners who'd come seeking simpler lives. "Or," Marcus said slowly, "we could try something different." The youngest crew member, David Chen, barely 25 and eager as the day he joined them, leaned forward. "What do you mean, Captain? Look at that world down there. Rich soil, good climate, no major predators. Land costs almost nothing because it's so far from the core worlds." Marcus turned to face his crew. "What if we bought a piece of it? Built something that's ours?" The Altarian archaeologist, Dr. Nerith Voss, her blue-scaled skin shimmering in the station's artificial light, tilted her head. "You propose we become farmers?" "I propose we become whatever we want to be," Marcus replied. "We've spent years following other people's orders, going where contracts took us. What if we built something lasting? Something that's ours?" The silence stretched as each crew member contemplated the radical shift from explorers to settlers. Finally, Zara spoke up with a grin. "Hell, I've been fixing broken things for 30 years. Might be nice to build something from scratch for once." One by one, the others nodded. They'd found something rarer than any mineral they'd catalogued, a chance to create a home, breaking ground. The land stretched before them like a green ocean, 200 acres of rolling hills, clear streams, and ancient trees that had never known an axe. Marcus stood at the highest point of their new property, watching his crew scatter across the landscape like seeds finding their place to grow. "The soil's perfect for Terran crops," David called out, holding up a clump of dark earth. "pH levels are almost identical to Earth standard. We could have our first harvest within 6 months." Jexra was examining the tree line with professional interest. "The local ecosystem is remarkably compatible with most known species. The medical applications alone could be significant. More importantly," Zara shouted from near the stream, "there's a natural spring here. Fresh water year-round, and the flow's strong enough to power basic generators." The first months were harder than any deep space mission they'd ever undertaken. Space had rules: if your life support failed, you died quickly. On Verdant Prime, failure meant slower, more insidious challenges. Crops could fail, tools could break, weather could destroy weeks of work in a single storm, but they adapted. Marcus discovered a talent for carpentry that surprised everyone, including himself. The first structure they built was a common house, a simple but sturdy building where they could all shelter while constructing individual homes. Working together, they raised walls, fitted joints, and sealed roofs against the planet's frequent but gentle rains. Zara's engineering background proved invaluable as she designed water collection systems and primitive wind turbines. "It's not so different from maintaining ship systems," she said, wiping her brow after installing their first generator. "Just instead of recycling air, we are harnessing weather. Dr. Voss threw herself into studying the local flora and fauna with the same intensity she'd once reserved for ancient alien ruins. Every ecosystem tells a story, she explained to David as they catalogued plant species. Understanding that story helps us write our own chapter without disrupting the narrative. The challenges came in unexpected forms. HFY, whose species preferred enclosed spaces, struggled with the vastness of open sky. Jexra, accustomed to sterile medical environments, had to learn to work with natural remedies when their advanced medical supplies ran low. Tomas, who could navigate between star systems, got lost in their own woods 3 times in the first month, but with each challenge came small victories. The first night they cooked a meal over a fire they'd built themselves, using vegetables from their garden, was a celebration that rivaled any shore leave on the most exotic station. When David successfully repaired a broken plow using materials scavenged from the Wanderer's dream before they'd sold her, the cheer was louder than when they'd discovered their first habitable world. "You know," Marcus said as they sat around their fire pit, stomachs full and muscles aching from honest work, "I spent 7 years looking for new worlds. Turns out I needed to stop looking and start building." The fire crackled, and in its light, 7 former wanderers began to understand what home truly meant. The season of storms. The first major test came with the autumn storms. The locals had warned them, Verdant Prime's weather patterns could be violent during the seasonal transitions. But Marcus and his crew had weathered ion storms in the void. Between stars, how bad could planetary weather be, they learned quickly. The storm system that rolled in during their 4th month on the planet brought winds that howled like banshees and rain that fell in sheets so thick they couldn't see 10 feet beyond their common house. For 3 days, they huddled together while their carefully tended crops were battered and their half-built structures groaned under the assault. "The north wall of the barn is compromised," Zara reported, water dripping from her hair as she returned from a scouting run. "We need to shore it up before the whole thing comes down." "In this weather?" Tomas asked, watching through the window as their new fruit trees bent nearly horizontal. "In this weather," Marcus confirmed. "Because if we don't, we lose months of work." They went out in pairs, linked by safety ropes, fighting against wind that tried to knock them flat. HFY, despite his discomfort with open spaces, proved invaluable. His species' forearms and low center of gravity made him the most stable in the gale. Together, they managed to brace the failing structure just as a massive gust would have toppled it, but they paid a price. Nearly half their crop was destroyed, and several of their carefully constructed outbuildings were damaged beyond repair. As the storm finally passed and they surveyed the destruction, the weight of their situation settled over them like a cold fog. "We don't have enough food stored for winter," David said quietly, looking at the ruined garden. "The grain was almost ready for harvest. And our cash reserves are getting low," added Tomas. "We spent most of it on the land and initial supplies." It was Dr. Voss who proposed the solution. "The nearest settlement is Millbrook, about 30 kilometers south. They might need temporary workers for their harvest season." Pride warred with practicality. They were former deep space explorers, veterans of the galaxy's most dangerous missions. But they were also settlers now, and settlers did what they had to do to survive. The work was hard, loading grain wagons, repairing equipment, processing harvests that would feed the colony through winter. But the people of Millbrook welcomed them with the easy camaraderie of those who understood struggle. In the evenings, they shared stories around communal fires, and Marcus found himself talking about their dream of building something permanent. "Most folks who come out here don't last 2 seasons, said Beth Harrison, Millbrook's de facto leader. "They expect frontier life to be some kind of adventure. You're the first group I've met who seem to understand it's just life, harder than most, but life all the same." The work paid enough to buy winter supplies and seed for spring planting. More importantly, it connected them to the broader community of settlers who were carving lives from the wilderness. They learned techniques for preserving food, methods for weatherproofing structures, and the subtle art of reading the planet's moods through cloud patterns and wind directions. When they returned to their land as winter settled in, they carried more than supplies. They carried knowledge, connections, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to belong to a place. That winter, as they sat in their reinforced common house while snow fell outside, Marcus realized they'd passed their first real test. They hadn't just survived the storm, they'd learned to be part of something larger than themselves. Deeper root spring brought new challenges and unexpected visitors. Marcus was working in the rebuilt garden when the ship's signature registered. On their old proximity sensors, equipment they'd kept as a precaution. The vessel that landed in their north field was sleek, military, and unwelcome. Commander Reese Blackwood stepped out wearing the crisp uniform of the Terran Colonial Authority, flanked by two armed Marines. Marcus felt his crew gathering behind him, old instincts making them unconsciously form a defensive formation. "Captain Holt," Blackwood said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Quite a life you've built here." "It's not Captain anymore," Marcus replied evenly. "Just Marcus. And this is private property." "Indeed it is. Which is why I'm here." Blackwood produced a data tablet. "The Galactic Survey Corps has classified this sector as strategically important. Your old survey data has revealed mineral deposits that could be vital for the war effort against the hegemony." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Marcus felt his heart sink as he understood the implications. "You're requisitioning our land. The Colonial Authority is prepared to offer fair compensation. Enough to buy property on any of a dozen civilized worlds. You could live comfortably for the rest of your lives." "This is our home," David said, stepping forward. Dirt clung to his hands from the morning's planting, and his voice carried a conviction that surprised even Marcus. "Son, you're farmers playing at being pioneers. When the real mining operations begin, you won't want to be anywhere near here. The process isn't environmentally friendly." It was Dr. Voss who asked the crucial question. "What's the timeline for this requisition?" "Standard procedure allows for a 30-day transition period. After that, the land reverts to Colonial Authority control for strategic resource extraction." That night, the crew gathered around their fire pit in grim silence. The flames danced in the darkness, casting shifting shadows on faces that had grown weathered and strong from their months of frontier life. "We could fight it legally," Tomas suggested. "Colonial law requires compensation hearings." "Which would lose," Zara said flatly. "Military needs always override civilian claims during wartime." "We could simply leave," Jexra offered quietly. "Find another world, start again." The suggestion fell into silence. Finally, Kethvar spoke, his mandibles clicking with determination. "No. We run no more. This is our place." The Zenthari don't have a word that translates directly to home. He continued. "For my people, there is only nest place and a hunting ground. But you humans have taught me something new. Home is not just where you rest, it is where you belong. Where you have given something of yourself to the earth, and the earth has accepted it." Marcus looked around at his family because that's what they'd become. "So what do we do?" It was David, the youngest, who provided the answer. "We do what we've always done. We adapt. We find a way." The plan they hatched over the following days was audacious, possibly illegal, and definitely dangerous. But it was theirs, and it offered the one thing Marcus had learned to value above all else, the chance to choose their own fate. They had 30 days to save their home. It would have to be enough. Homeground. The plan required precise timing and absolute trust. Marcus stood at the edge of their property, watching the Colonial Authority's advance team establish their base camp. Heavy machinery hummed in the distance, ready to begin the preliminary excavation that would strip away everything they'd built. "The geological survey found what they are looking for," Dr. Voss reported, a scanner showing the mineral deposits that ran deep beneath their land. "But they also found something else. Something they haven't recognized yet." 3 weeks of careful analysis had revealed the truth. Verdant Prime wasn't just compatible with known life, it was actively nurturing it. The planet's unique mineral composition created a symbiotic relationship with organic matter, accelerating growth and adaptation in ways that defied standard terraforming theory. "The trees aren't just trees," David explained to the gathering of neighboring settlers who'd come to hear their proposal. "They are part of a planetary network. The roots share nutrients and information across vast distances. If the mining destroys the root system, the entire continental ecosystem could collapse." Beth Harrison from Millbrook nodded grimly. And take every farm and settlement with it. So what's your plan? Asked another settler. Marcus smiled. We are going to give them exactly what they want, just not in the way they expect. The next morning, when Commander Blackwood arrived for the formal land transfer, he found something unprecedented. Instead of defeated farmers, he faced a delegation of the planet's settled population, led by Dr. Voss carrying a stack of scientific documentation. Commander, she said formally, I'm submitting an emergency petition under Colonial Environmental Protection Act, Section 12B. This planet qualifies for protected status as a Class A symbiotic ecosystem. Blackwood's composure cracked. That's impossible. The initial surveys showed standard biosphere patterns. The initial surveys were conducted from orbit. Ground-based analysis reveals a completely different picture. Voss handed over her data. The mineral deposits you're after are integral to the planet's life support system. Remove them and you trigger a cascade failure that could take centuries to reverse. Even if this is accurate, Blackwood said, scanning the documents, it would take months for the Environmental Council to review, which is why we've already submitted it to the Interspecies Conservation Alliance, Marcus interrupted. Along with documentation of our successful settlement patterns that prove sustainable coexistence is possible. The commander's face darkened. You're interfering with military operations during wartime. We are protecting a sovereign ecosystem. Under interspecies law, Kethvar replied, his voice carrying the formal authority of his species' diplomatic caste. The Zenthari Coalition supports this petition. As does the Corvana Medical Council, added Jexra. The pharmaceutical applications of this symbiotic system could revolutionize treatment for dozens of species. The standoff stretched for tense minutes. Finally, Blackwood spoke. This won't stop the extraction. It'll just delay it. Maybe, Marcus agreed. But delays have a way of becoming permanent when better alternatives emerge. We are not just farmers anymore, Commander. We are researchers, conservationists, and advocates for a new way of settling frontier worlds. And we are not going anywhere. The colonial authority ship lifted off that afternoon, carrying disappointed officials and sealed orders. The legal challenge would win through bureaucratic channels for months, possibly years. But Marcus and his crew had learned something valuable. Sometimes the best way to fight for your home is to make it too important to lose. That evening, as they sat around their fire pit, the conversation turned to the future. Their small settlement was growing, new families arriving each month, drawn by stories of successful cooperation between humans and the planet's ecosystem. We should name it, suggested David. The settlement, I mean. It's getting big enough to need a proper name. What about Haven, proposed Zara. Place of safety and rest. Too simple, said Tomas. How about Crossroads? We are the meeting place between space and soil. Dr. Voss looked up at the stars, no longer distant points of light but waypoints. On journeys that had led them here. What about landing? Simple, but it captures what we've done. We've finally come down to Earth. Marcus nodded slowly. Landing it is. The place where wanderers learn to stay. As the fire died down and his family prepared for sleep, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. They traded the endless black of space for the rich brown of soil, the artificial recycling of ship's air for the living breath of forests. They'd learned that home wasn't a destination you discovered, it was a life you built, one day at a time, with your own hands and the help of those who chose to stay beside you. The journey was over. The real adventure was just beginning.